Every Thursday, my trash can was mysteriously knocked over, until I caught the culprit on camera and set a trap she never saw coming. Wait until you hear what happened when the siren went off. When I first moved into Willow Creek, everything felt perfect. Fresh paint on the cozy houses, neatly trimmed lawns, and a quiet that made me think I'd finally found a peaceful place to settle down. The first week was blissful. Birds chirped in the morning, neighbors smiled politely when they passed by, and the air carried that crisp early autumn smell. But that calm didn't last long. On the second Thursday after moving in, I stepped outside to drag the trash can back in and froze. The heavy plastic bin was lying on its side, lid propped neatly on top as if someone had carefully placed it there after tipping it over. A few scraps of paper fluttered across the driveway, but the garbage bag itself wasn't torn. It looked too precise to be an accident. I told myself it was probably the wind, even though the air had been still all night. The following week, it happened again. Same day, same time of morning. Trash scattered just enough to be annoying but never fully spilled. I started noticing small details I'd missed before. The faint scuff marks on the side of the can, the way the lid was always set at an odd angle as if someone had deliberately balanced it. Raccoons or stray dogs couldn't be that tidy. Neighbors began to whisper little things when we chatted at the mailbox. Someone mentioned the name Karen, a longtime HOA board member known for patrolling the neighborhood like she owned it. I'd spotted her once or twice, a sharp-eyed woman with a tight bun and a clipboard, always peeking out from behind her curtains when someone walked by. Every time our eyes met, she gave me a thin, disapproving smile that felt more like a warning than a greeting. By the fourth Thursday, I could no longer shrug it off. This wasn't random. Someone, maybe this mysterious Karen, was knocking over my trash can on purpose. I started to feel that prickly sensation of being watched. The uneasy sense that no matter how quiet the street seemed, someone was keeping tabs on me. The perfect neighborhood I thought I'd found suddenly felt like a stage where I was the unsuspecting main act in someone else's strange little game. The next week, I decided enough was enough. Waking up to a tipped-over trash can was more than just a nuisance. It felt personal now. I started planning like I was setting up a stakeout for a mystery show. On Wednesday night, I brewed an extra pot of coffee and pulled a chair up to the front window, determined to catch whoever was doing this. The street was silent except for the occasional hum of a distant car. Midnight came and went. I sat there with my mug growing cold, eyes darting at every flicker of light, every rustle of leaves. But nothing happened. By 3 a.m., the only sound was the clock ticking on the wall behind me. My eyelids grew heavy, and finally I gave in, stumbling to bed. When I woke at 7 a.m., the first thing I did was rush to the driveway. My stomach dropped. The can was on its side again, lid perfectly balanced just like before. Someone had come and gone while I was awake and watching. It made my skin crawl. Whoever it was knew how to stay invisible. That afternoon, I tried asking a few neighbors if they'd seen anything. Most gave me polite but nervous smiles. One older man chuckled and said, "You'll get used to the quirks around here," before quickly changing the subject. Another woman lowered her voice and whispered that Karen from the HOA liked to keep things neat, but she wouldn't say more. It felt like everyone knew something but was too afraid to talk about it. I couldn't shake the thought of Karen's sharp eyes behind those curtains. I'd seen her standing there at odd hours just watching the street. Was she really sneaking out at night? It sounded crazy, but nothing else made sense. I needed proof, something undeniable. That evening, I drove to the hardware store and bought a small motion detection camera, the kind people use to watch for porch pirates. I tucked it inside a large potted plant at the edge of my driveway, where it had a clear view of the trash can. I tested the angle, making sure the lens was hidden but pointed directly at the spot where the mysterious knockdowns happened. As I went to bed, my heart pounded with nervous excitement. If someone was messing with me, I was finally going to catch them in the act. The following morning, I practically leapt out of bed before the alarm went off. My heart raced as I grabbed my phone to check the camera feed. At first, the footage was painfully ordinary. Just hours of still darkness, the occasional car passing in the distance, and a stray cat wandering across the sidewalk. I sped through the timeline with my finger, my pulse quickening with each minute that ticked by. Then, at exactly 3:12 a.m., the screen flickered with movement. A shadow stretched across the driveway, slow and deliberate. I froze, leaning closer until my nose almost touched the screen. The figure crept toward the trash can. a dark shape moving with eerie confidence. For a moment, the person lingered at the edge of the light, almost as if making sure no one was watching. As the figure stepped fully into view, the porch light caught the face. My breath caught in my throat. It was Karen. There she was, wearing a gray hoodie pulled tight around her head and a pair of garden gloves like she was about to plant flowers instead of sabotage my trash can. She didn't even look around nervously. With a calmness that chilled me, she placed both hands on the bin and gave it a sharp shove. It toppled onto its side with a dull thud. Then just as casually, she adjusted the lid so it balanced neatly on top, turned, and strolled back into the darkness as if it were part of her nightly routine. I sat there staring at the video, a mix of anger and disbelief flooding through me. It wasn't a raccoon. It wasn't the wind. It was her, the woman who smiled at me with tight lips every time I passed her house. I replayed the clip again and again, each time feeling a deeper sting of irritation. Why would she do this? What could possibly drive someone to knock over a neighbor's trash can in the dead of night? Confronting her immediately flashed through my mind, but something held me back. Marching over to her door might only make things worse, and part of me didn't want her to know I had the footage just yet. I wanted a solution that would end the game entirely, something that would make her think twice without a single word exchanged. The idea of a slow, clever payback started to form as I watched the video one more time. A plan that would give Karen the shock she'd never see coming. All day I turned possibilities over in my mind, half annoyed and half exhilarated by the chance to outsmart her. I didn't just want to stop her. I wanted to make sure she never even thought about trying again. By evening, an idea started to take shape. I drove to a home improvement store and wandered the aisles, picking up pieces like I was assembling a puzzle only I could see. First, I chose the sturdiest trash can I could find, a thick, industrial-grade container that looked ordinary, but weighed twice as much as my old one. Next came a heavy steel post, the kind meant to anchor a mailbox. I also grabbed a lockable lid with a hidden latch and a compact motion-triggered alarm that promised a shriek loud enough to wake the block. The cashier raised an eyebrow as I wheeled everything to the register, but I just smiled. Back home, I worked late into the night. Under the dim glow of my porch light, I dug a deep hole beside the driveway and set the steel post in concrete. When the base was solid, I attached a thick bracket to hold the trash can in place. From the street, it looked completely normal, just another bin waiting for pickup day. But this one was bolted so tightly it might as well have been part of the house. Inside, I mounted the alarm beneath the lid, adjusting the sensor so it would trigger only after midnight. I tested it once, wincing as a piercing screech echoed down the street. Perfect. The following Thursday, I set the new can in position and went about my evening as if nothing had changed. From the outside, it blended in perfectly with the old routine, and that was exactly the point. Around 10 p.m., I made a pot of tea and stationed myself near the front window. The neighborhood slipped into silence as lights blinked out one by one. Midnight passed. The air felt thick with anticipation, every creak of the house sharpening my focus. At 3 a.m., it happened. A sudden, ear-splitting alarm shattered the stillness like a fire engine parked on my porch. I jumped even though I'd been expecting it. Through the window, I saw a figure recoil in shock. Karen. She stood frozen in the glow of the street lamp, eyes wide, hands hovering above the locked lid. The anchored bin hadn't budged an inch despite her effort to tip it. The alarm wailed louder, echoing off the houses. One by one, lights flicked on up and down the street. Curtains shifted as sleepy neighbors peeked outside. Karen looked around wildly, caught in the spotlight of her own making. For a moment, she tried to pull at the can again, but the heavy post held firm. Finally, she stepped back, her face pale and tight, before hurrying off into the shadows. The alarm continued to scream for another 30 seconds, a triumphant soundtrack to the end of her late-night game. The next morning, I half expected to find a note of complaint or maybe even another act of retaliation, but instead there was a timid knock at my door just after sunrise. When I opened it, Karen stood there, her usual sharp posture gone. Her face looked drawn and tired, her eyes red-rimmed as if she hadn't slept. For a long moment, she just held her clasped hands in front of her and stared at the porch floor. "I'm sorry," she said finally, her voice cracking. I didn't say anything, waiting for her to explain. Then it all spilled out in a rush. She told me that the HOA had been quietly issuing her steep fines for unsightly trash issues near her property. According to her, Someone else on the board had complained about overflowing bins and scattered litter along the street, and she'd been singled out because her house sat at the corner where garbage often blew. She said she'd already paid hundreds of dollars and was terrified of losing more money she didn't have. In a twisted attempt to prove she wasn't the only one with messy surroundings, she started tipping over other people's trash cans in the dead of night. Mine most often because it stood closest to the road. "I know it was wrong," she whispered, eyes glistening. I didn't know what else to do." I felt trapped. Her confession softened the anger that had been buzzing in me for weeks. I still couldn't excuse what she'd done, but it suddenly made a grim kind of sense. I told her about the footage and the alarm, and to my surprise, she didn't get defensive. Instead, she nodded, as if relieved someone finally understood the pressure she was under. Later that day, I sent the video and her explanation to the HOA, not out of spite but to shine a light on how ridiculous the rules had become. The reaction was louder than I expected. Several neighbors had similar stories: petty fines, secret complaints, endless warnings. Within weeks, a special meeting was called. The board president resigned under pressure, and a new set of fairer guidelines was voted in to keep the association from bullying anyone again. Now, every Thursday morning, my trash can stands perfectly upright, silent, and secure. Karen still lives a few houses down, and while we're not exactly friends, we exchange small, awkward waves when we pass each other. There's no more hostility, just a quiet understanding. My unspillable trash can turned out to be more than a clever trap. It became the spark that changed the entire neighborhood, a reminder that sometimes the biggest surprises come from the simplest stand you're willing to take. Thanks for watching this wild neighborhood showdown. If you enjoyed seeing how a little creativity turned the tables, hit that like button and share this video with anyone dealing with their own Karen drama. Don't forget to subscribe and ring the bell so you never miss the next unbelievable story. What clever idea would you have used to stop her? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I read every single one.